The Valaxian High Command vessel Eternal Glory hung in space like a twisted obsidian spear, its crystalline surface absorbing, rather than reflecting the light of nearby stars. Supreme Commander Zarkak stood at the bridge's observation deck, his scaled shoulders tense as he reviewed the sensor data for the third time. The readings made no sense. "Confirm analysis," he commanded, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. These primitive vessels crossed 40 light-years in under a week. "Confirmed, Supreme Commander," his science officer replied, mandibles clicking in agitation. The human ships appear to be using some form of quantum tunneling technology. Crude, but effective. Zarkax's primary heart quickened its pace while his secondary remained steady, a sign of anticipation in his species. For 10,000 years, the Valaxian Empire had ruled the known worlds. Their mastery of dark matter technology and neural-linked weaponry had made them unstoppable. Every species they encountered either submitted to their rule or faced extinction. These humans would be no different. Yet something about them felt wrong. Their ships were ungainly, built for function rather than form. A cardinal sin in Valaxian culture. They showed no fear when confronted by Valaxian warships, no proper reverence for their superiors. Most disturbing of all, they seemed eager to trade and learn, rather than immediately surrendering or fighting. "Your orders, Supreme Commander," his first officer inquired. "Shall we deploy the subjugation fleet?" Zarkax considered the question. Standard protocol called for an overwhelming show of force, but these humans had already violated too many of his expectations. "No, send a diplomatic delegation first. I want to understand what we're dealing with before we crush them." The humans accepted the diplomatic meeting with unsettling enthusiasm. Their representatives arrived in a ship that was little more than a metal box with engines, an insult by Galaxian standards. Yet the humans seemed oblivious to how their crude technology reflected on them. Ambassador Sarah Chen led the human delegation, a diminutive female who barely reached Zarkax's chest. She showed no sign of intimidation as she stood before the Supreme Commander and his war council. "We're honored to meet you," she said through the translation matrix. "Humanity looks forward to peaceful cultural and technological exchange." Several council members hissed at her presumption. The very idea that humans had anything to teach the Valaxians was laughable. Zarkax raised a clawed hand for silence. "You misunderstand your position, human. We are not here to exchange. We are here to inform you of your options. Submit to Valaxian rule or face annihilation." Chen's expression remained pleasant, but something flickered in her eyes. "We understand that's been your standard approach. However, we believe there's room for a different kind of relationship, one of mutual benefit." Zarkax felt his scales ripple with amusement. "You've seen our ships, our weapons. Your entire civilization exists because we allow it. What possible benefit could you offer us?" "Innovation," Chen replied simply. "Your empire is vast and powerful, but from what we've observed, it's also static. You haven't made any major technological breakthroughs in centuries. We could help change that." The War Council erupted in outrage. Zarkax himself felt his fighting bladders fill with rage venom. How dare this primitive creature suggest the Valaxians needed help? Yet beneath his anger, an uncomfortable thought formed. She was right about their technological stagnation, though no Valaxian would ever admit it. "You will submit," he said coldly, "or you will die. Those are your only options." Chen sighed, looking genuinely disappointed. "We were afraid you'd say that." "Very well. We'll take your message back to Earth. But please remember, we tried to do this the easy way." The human delegation departed, leaving behind an atmosphere of unease that Zarkax couldn't quite shake. He ordered immediate surveillance of all human worlds and activities. The reports that came back were puzzling. The humans carried on as if nothing had changed. They continued their expansion, built their ugly ships, and showed no signs of preparing for war. "They're either foolish or planning something," Zarkax told his council. "Either way, we should strike now, while they're still weak." First Minister Kval, oldest of the council members, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Perhaps we should study them longer. Their behavior doesn't match any species we've encountered before. That's precisely why they're dangerous, Zarkax countered. They're unpredictable. Better to eliminate them now before they become a real threat. The council voted to approve a military response. Zarkax assembled the largest fleet seen in a generation. 10,000 warships, each capable of reducing a planet's surface to slag. The humans had settlements on 20 worlds. He would strike them all simultaneously, demonstrating the price of defying the Valaxian Empire. The attack was scheduled for the next lunar conjunction, a traditional time for Valaxian military campaigns. But 3 days before the fleet was to depart, something unprecedented occurred. Every neural-linked weapon in the Valaxian arsenal suddenly stopped responding to commands. Zarkax stood on his bridge, watching in horror as display after display went dark. Across the Empire, their most advanced technology was becoming useless, infected by some kind of computational virus that spread faster than their best cyber defense systems could respond. A communication request came through, on an old primitive frequency the Valaxians hadn't used in millennia. Zarkax accepted it, and Ambassador Chen's face appeared on his screen. "Supreme Commander," she said, still wearing that pleasant expression, "I believe it's time we had another discussion about the nature of our relationship. And this time, I hope you'll be more open to a genuine exchange of ideas." Zarkax felt his primary heart stop for a moment as understanding dawned. The humans hadn't been ignoring the threat. They'd been actively preparing for it. While the Valaxians watched for signs of military buildup, the humans had found a way to turn the Empire's own technology against itself. For the first time in his life, Supreme Commander Zarkax felt something he'd never expected to experience. Fear of a lesser species, and as he looked at Chen's calm smile, he realized that humans were going to change everything about his universe, whether the Valaxians wanted them to or not. The Valaxian Empire had never known defeat. They had certainly never known humiliation. Yet, as reports flooded in from across their territory of malfunctioning systems and compromised defenses, both seemed increasingly possible. In the grand chamber of the Imperial Palace, Zarkax faced the assembled War Council. The massive holographic displays that normally illuminated the chamber with real-time battle data were dark, reduced to using primitive projection technology that felt like a step back into barbarism. "The humans call it quantum entanglement hacking," Kval reported, his usual dignified demeanor shaken. "They somehow used our own neural link networks to introduce corrupted code that spreads faster than light itself. Every connected system is compromised." "Impossible," General Vextor snarled, slamming his armored fist against the ancient stone table. "Their technology is primitive. We've seen their worlds, their ships. They're centuries behind us." A quiet voice spoke from the shadows. "That's what they wanted us to see." All eyes turned to Science Minister Ixel, the youngest member of the council. She stepped forward, her scales shifting to a troubled gray. "We've been analyzing their civilian technology, their visible infrastructure. But their quantum tunneling drives should have been impossible with their apparent level of development. We ignored the contradiction because it didn't fit our assumptions." The implications hung heavy in the chamber. The humans hadn't just been hiding their true capabilities, they'd been deliberately presenting themselves as less advanced than they were. It was a concept so alien to Valaxian thinking that even now, some council members couldn't process it. Across human space, life continued as if nothing had changed. Their ships still looked crude, their colonies still appeared primitive. But now, watching more closely, the Valaxians began to notice things they'd missed before. The subtle efficiency of their systems, the way their technology seemed to accomplish more with less, the complete absence of waste or ostentation that characterized Valaxian engineering. Ambassador Chen requested another meeting, this time on neutral ground, a trading station in unclaimed space. Zarkax agreed, though the loss of his neural-linked weapons made him feel naked, reduced to wearing primitive kinetic armor that hadn't been used in generations. Your attack was impressive, he admitted as they sat across from each other in the station's conference room. But you must know we have other weapons. Entire fleets that don't rely on neural link technology. We can still destroy your worlds. Chen nodded. You could. And we could release the rest of our virus packets. Did you know your atmospheric processors use the same basic architecture as your weapon systems? Your gravity generators, even your food synthesizers. She smiled. We've had 3 years to study your technology, Supreme Commander. 3 years while you were so busy being superior that you never thought to ask what we were learning. Zarkax felt his scales bristle. You deceived us. We survived you. Chen corrected. We looked at your history. Every species you encountered either fought you immediately and was destroyed, or submitted and was absorbed. So we chose a third path. We studied. We adapted. We prepared. And now you'll destroy us. There was a bitter taste in Zarkax's mouth as he said it. Chen's expression softened. No, now we're going to help you. The statement was so unexpected that Zarkax's translator took a moment to process it. Help us. Your empire has ruled for 10,000 years, but at a terrible cost. You've stopped growing, innovating, taking risks. Every species you've conquered has been forced into the same stagnant pattern. She leaned forward. We want to change that, not by destroying you, but by showing you a better way. As if to emphasize her point, a gentle chime sounded throughout the station. On every display, the dead neural link systems suddenly reactivated. But they were different, faster, more efficient, with capabilities that hadn't existed before. We've removed the military applications, Chen explained, but we've also improved everything else. Your medical systems now operate at twice their previous efficiency. Your computational networks are 30% faster. This is what happens when you collaborate instead of conquer. Zarkax struggled to process what was happening. The humans had the power to cripple the empire, yet instead they were offering to help it grow. It defied every principle of warfare and dominance that the Valaxians had lived by for millennia. Why? He finally asked. Why show mercy when you could show strength? Chen's answer was simple, because that's what humanity does best. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to explore it, learn from it, make it better. And we think the Valaxian Empire, with its resources and experience, could be an incredible partner in that mission, if you're willing to change. As Zarkax left the meeting, he carried with him a data crystal containing human proposals for joint scientific ventures, cultural exchange programs, and cooperative exploration initiatives. But more than that, he carried a growing understanding that his people faced a choice: adapt to this new paradigm, or become obsolete. In the months that followed, the Valaxian Empire experienced something it hadn't known in thousands of years: transformation. Some resisted, clinging to the old ways. But as human innovations began improving life across Valaxian space, as new discoveries and possibilities emerged from collaboration, even the most conservative elements had to admit that something remarkable was happening. The humans had conquered the Valaxian Empire not with weapons, but with ideas, and in doing so, they had achieved something no species had managed in 10,000 years. They had made the empire grow again. On the desert world of Caxthor Prime, in chambers deep beneath the burning sands, the resistance gathered. Dozens of Valaxian military commanders and noble houses had rejected the new alliance with humanity, viewing it as a surrender in all but name. High General Makvar, his scales darkened to match the stone walls, addressed the assembled warriors. Our empire bows to primitives, he growled. While weak leaders like Zarkax speak of cooperation and progress, our warrior culture erodes. We must strike now, before humans corrupt us further. But striking at humans proved more challenging than any of them had anticipated. Traditional Valaxian military doctrine relied on overwhelming force and superior technology, yet human settlements were maddeningly difficult to target. Their vital infrastructure was distributed, redundant, often hidden in plain sight. A single colony might recover from devastating orbital bombardment within days, its backup systems and emergency protocols making it resilient beyond reason. More disturbing were the changes spreading through Valaxian society. Younger Valaxians especially were embracing human ideas about innovation and individual initiative. The rigid hierarchies that had defined their civilization for millennia were beginning to shift. Some even questioned the fundamental premise of Valaxian superiority. Ambassador Chen, now serving as the human liaison to the imperial court, seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Her diplomatic duties took her across the empire, meeting with noble houses, touring military installations, speaking at academic forums. The resistance watched her carefully, looking for an opportunity to strike a decisive blow against human influence. They found none. Instead, they discovered that many of their own members were beginning to waver. The humans' approach to problem-solving was infuriatingly effective. Their technological innovations were improving life across the empire in ways that were difficult to dismiss. They're like a virus. Makvar raged during a secret council. They infect everything they touch with their ideas of progress and change. An aide interrupted the meeting with urgent news. 3 of their hidden weapons facilities had been discovered, not by human forces or imperial loyalists, but by civilian engineering teams implementing new safety protocols. The Resistance's carefully stockpiled weapons were being confiscated not through military action, but through routine infrastructure inspections. "This is their true weapon," said Kerval, once Makvar's strongest supporter. "They don't fight us directly. They change the environment around us until our own people see us as the threat." The human strategy became clearer with each passing day. They weren't trying to defeat the Resistance. They were making it irrelevant. By introducing new technologies and ideas that improved life for ordinary Valaxians, they were undermining the very grievances that fueled resistance to their presence. Trade routes once controlled by military forces were now managed by automated systems that reduced costs and increased efficiency. Colonies that had depended on central authority for survival were becoming self-sufficient thanks to human agricultural and manufacturing innovations. The power structures that the Resistance relied upon were dissolving not through conquest, but through progress. Makvar made one final attempt to rally his forces. He planned a coordinated strike against key human diplomatic facilities across the empire. The attack would show everyone that the old ways were still supreme. The operation was a disaster, not because the humans stopped them, but because their own people did. Civilian Valaxians, military units, even members of ancient noble houses stepped in to prevent the attacks. The Resistance hadn't lost a battle. They'd lost the support of their own civilization. In a final bitter irony, when Makvar was captured, it wasn't humans who took him into custody. It was a joint task force of Valaxian and human peacekeepers, working together with an efficiency that would have been unimaginable months earlier. During his interrogation, human specialists didn't torture him or even threaten him. Instead, they offered him a choice: adapt or be left behind. They showed him projects where his military expertise could be applied to exploration and defense. They appealed not to his fear, but to his potential for growth. "Your empire wasn't built just on conquest," Chen told him during a private meeting in his cell. "It was built on the ability to absorb and integrate new peoples, new ideas. Somewhere along the way, you forgot that. We're just helping you remember." As Makvar sat in his cell, watching younger Valaxians eagerly working alongside humans on projects that pushed the boundaries of known science, he realized the true depth of humanity's strategy. They hadn't needed to defeat the Valaxian Empire in battle. They had transformed it so completely that the empire he had wanted to preserve no longer existed. And perhaps most disturbing of all, most Valaxians seemed happier this way. The grand archives of the Valaxian Empire had stood unchanged for millennia, its crystalline spires housing the collected knowledge of countless conquered civilizations. But today, for the first time in its history, the archives were undergoing transformation. Human and Valaxian engineers worked side by side, installing new quantum storage systems that would make the vast repository of knowledge accessible to all citizens, not just the privileged few. Supreme Commander Zarkax, now serving as co-chair of the Joint Development Council, watched the work with mixed emotions. In less than a standard year, humanity had reshaped Valaxian society more profoundly than 10,000 years of conquest ever had. The distribution of knowledge concerned some of the older houses, he commented to Chen, who stood beside him watching the installation. They fear it will breed chaos. Knowledge always brings change, she replied. But it also brings opportunity. Look at what's already happening in your outer colonies. She was right, of course. The integration of human innovation with Valaxian infrastructure had led to an unprecedented boom in development across the empire. Colonies that had once been mere outposts were becoming centers of research and industry. Species that had been subjugated for generations were contributing their own unique perspectives to solving problems that had stumped Valaxian scientists for centuries. But not everyone embraced this new order. Reports came in of isolated holdouts, military commanders and noble houses who refused to accept the changes. They launched desperate attacks against human facilities, tried to maintain the old power structures, and attempted to prevent their people from accessing human innovations. These efforts inevitably failed, not because of human intervention, but because their own people had tasted something they'd never known before: the freedom to innovate, to question, to grow. The humans' most powerful weapon proved to be simple curiosity. They asked questions that Valaxians had been trained for generations not to ask. Why did things work the way they did? Could they work better? What if we tried something new? These questions spread like wildfire through Valaxian society, particularly among the younger generations. The rigid hierarchies and unquestioning obedience that had maintained imperial power for millennia began to crumble in the face of something more powerful: the desire to understand and improve. A crisis point came when the Seventh Fleet, under the command of Admiral Vextor, attempted to seize control of a major trading hub. The admiral expected to rally support from traditionalists across the empire. Instead, his own crews mutinied, refusing to fire on civilian targets. The weapons systems that hadn't been upgraded with human innovations simply failed to function. "Your mistake," Chen later told the captured admiral, "was thinking we needed to defeat your military to change your empire. We just needed to make war obsolete." The humans had understood something that the Valaxians had forgotten over their millennia of dominance. True power wasn't about controlling people, but about empowering them. Every innovation they introduced was designed not just to solve a problem, but to inspire further innovation. They created teaching systems that adapted to individual learning styles. They developed technologies that could be maintained and modified by users, rather than requiring specialized access. They encouraged cross-species collaboration that leveraged the unique strengths of different races. Most importantly, they showed the Valaxians something they had never considered: that an empire could be stronger by lifting up its people rather than controlling them. The breaking point for the old guard came when human-inspired innovations led to a breakthrough in faster-than-light travel. A team of young Valaxian scientists, working with colleagues from 3 formerly subjugated species, developed a new form of quantum drive that made traditional Valaxian ships obsolete. The discovery should have been devastating to Valaxian pride. Instead, it was celebrated across the empire. The young scientists were hailed as heroes, proof that Valaxian ingenuity could flourish in this new era of cooperation. "You've destroyed us," an old noble told Chen during a public debate. "The Valaxian Empire, as it was, is gone forever." "No," Chen corrected gently. "We've helped you become what you always could have been. Your empire was built on taking the best from other civilizations. You just forgot how to do it without conquest." As Zarkax watched the archives transform, he understood finally what the humans had done. They hadn't just defeated the old empire. They had made something better rise from its foundations. The Valaxians were still proud, still powerful, but their strength now came from innovation and collaboration rather than domination. The tables hadn't just turned, they had been completely redesigned, and the galaxy was better for it. A decade after first contact, the Galactic Assembly convened for the first time in the newly constructed Unity Station orbiting the Valaxian homeworld. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the vast chamber, including many that had once been subjects of the Valaxian Empire. But they no longer came as conquered peoples, they came as equals. Supreme Commander Zarkax, his scales now bearing the silver markings of a teacher elder, stood at the podium. Looking out at the assembled delegates, he could hardly believe how much had changed. The Valaxian Empire hadn't fallen. It had evolved into something far greater than conquest could have ever achieved. 10 years ago, he began, we thought we knew what power was. We measured it in warships, in subjugated worlds, in the ability to destroy. Humanity showed us a different kind of power, the power of transformation. The changes had spread far beyond technology and governance. Valaxian culture itself had undergone a renaissance. Their art, once rigidly formal, now incorporated influences from dozens of species. Their sciences, freed from military focus, had made breakthroughs in medicine, environmental restoration, and space exploration. The former empire had become a hub of innovation, drawing scholars and researchers from across known space. The same drive for excellence that had once made the Valaxians fearsome conquerors now made them leaders in collaborative research and development. Ambassador Chen, now significantly older but still carrying that same quiet confidence, sat among the human delegation. She remembered the risks they had taken, the careful calculations that had gone into their approach. Humanity had gambled that the Valaxians' greatest strength, their ability to absorb and adapt, could be turned toward peace rather than conquest. The last holdouts of the old empire had finally surrendered not to weapons, but to progress. When the children of their most conservative noble houses began developing new technologies and forming bonds with other species, the old guard realized their time had truly passed. We stand here today, Zarkax continued, not as conquerors or conquered, but as partners in the greatest adventure any of us have ever known, the exploration and understanding of our galaxy. The assembly chamber itself was a testament to this new era. Built with a combination of Valaxian engineering, human innovation, and contributions from dozens of other species, it represented what was possible when different civilizations worked together rather than against each other. The old imperial palace had been transformed into a university where students from across the galaxy came to study. The military shipyards now produced exploration vessels and research ships. The neural link technology that had once controlled weapons now coordinated scientific experiments spanning multiple star systems. But perhaps the most profound change was in the Valaxian people themselves. They had rediscovered their capacity for wonder, for curiosity, for seeing the universe not as something to be dominated, but as something to be understood. The humans didn't defeat us, Zarkax said, nearing the end of his speech. They reminded us of who we could be. They showed us that true power lies not in the ability to destroy or control, but in the ability to grow, to learn, to change. In the decades that followed, historians would debate whether humanity's approach to the Valaxian Empire had been carefully planned or simply their natural way of interacting with the universe. The truth was somewhere in between. Humans had acted according to their nature, curious, adaptive, innovative. And in doing so, they had changed the nature of an empire. The Valaxians remained proud, remained powerful, but their pride now came from what they could create rather than what they could destroy. Their power stemmed from their ability to bring people together rather than force them into submission. As the assembly concluded its first session, Zarkax and Chen stood together at the observation deck, watching ships from 100 worlds move through the space around Unity Station. "Did you know it would turn out this way?" he asked her. Chen smiled. "We hoped. Humanity has learned through our own history that the most lasting changes come not from conquest, but from showing people a better way. You were ready to change. You just needed to be shown the possibility." The Valaxian Empire had indeed fallen, But what rose in its place was something far greater. A civilization that measured its strength not by its ability to dominate, but by its capacity to elevate everyone it touched. And that perhaps was humanity's greatest victory, showing that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't conquest or control, but the simple, unstoppable power of positive change.